Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Legal Geeks. I'm here with Josh Gilliland as always. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Fantastic.
And we are here today to discuss all of the big legal and moral issues from all of the Star Trek series over the past 46 years, and we're going to do it rapid fire, very fast. Josh, I'm a Star Trek fan. I love Star Trek, but Josh is a Star Trek expert. So I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to kind of lead this off, but Josh is going to be the one hitting the highlights for us of all the different versions of Star Trek that we've seen over the years. So are you ready, Josh?
Let's boldly go.
All right, so we'll start off, of course, with the original, the classic Star Trek. What are you saying there? What's the big one from that Star Trek?
There were many because in the mid 60s there were lots of things happening in the civil rights movement and the space race. Lots of things were happening in the 60s. There was the episode of Court Martial, which I blogged about very early in our blog, dealing
Mm-hmm.
with testimony of a computer versus a human being and the issues that come up with that. But one that always bothered me, and this was a little more on the moral side and a little less on the legal side, was the episode of Metamorphosis. And in it, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a Federation commissioner named Nancy Hedford are forced to land on a little asteroid where they find Zephyrin Cochrane, the man who invented warp drive, who was depicted in First Contact, and he left when he was 87 years old. He was made young by this entity, so it looks like he's 35. He's lived there for 150 years, and the entity's is female. And they didn't know this, so like he's kind of, this female energy wave kind of goes over him, and it's basically having a relationship with him. And while this is going on, it won't let everybody leave. And Hedford is dying. She has this rare disease and she needs to be treated for it. Well, she gets too ill, and the alien, which apparently, if it could make Cochrane young, should be able to heal her. Well,
That's
it
true.
doesn't. Instead, it merges with her, so they become one, and it overwrites her. And it looks like, even though she speaks with we, and it sounds like a union of two female personalities, it seems like the entity's in charge.
Yeah.
And that always kind of bothered me. Like, what about her rights? It didn't heal her. Did she consent to like being merged? And then they elect to stay on the asteroid together, and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy leave. And the commissioner was needed to help avert a war, to help negotiate a peace. And McCoy asked about that, like, hey, what do we do here? And it ends with Kirk saying, "I'm sure the Federation can find another woman someplace to stop that war." And and like, for all the great progressive things that Star Trek did, you kind of sit back, and I was a little mortified by that one. That really rubbed me wrong. On the flip side, you watch the episode, and like, well, the Enterprise is looking for him. Scotty's in command, and it focuses on Scotty, Sulu, and Uhura. And in 1966, 1967, that was like very forward to have somebody who was Japanese and an African American woman, on the bridge, and like they're in charge. Today you watch, it's like, hey, people, you don't see them as anything but people. And
Thanks to
so,
Star Trek in the 60s and
and
others.
and a whole bunch of others, but it was just the way that they depicted race relations was great, and they normally did a very good job with women's issues, but that was like really regressive, and it always bothered me.
It's not only regressive, it's just Kirk is usually so focused on the individual, it seems too, that it just shows a callous disregard for, yeah, kind of that individual identity that he usually is a grand champion of, it seems, as opposed to the bigger social or the bigger group kind of dynamic that Spock was often more focused on, the greater good and all that.
It was a very odd. Again, it might just be a victim of being in the mid 60s. I mean, like, the women's rights movement was in process at the time, but still, it was just bad writing. I mean, it's just weird, and all of that. It's a person's personality getting overwritten, and like,
Mm-hmm.
by an alien life form, and like, maybe they were all very happy at the end, but it was just weird, and
Just
like, not.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like, how's a professional woman okay with that? Sure, I don't mind destroying everything I worked for.
I'll
Oh,
just stay
cool.
here. Yeah.
I'm happy now. So
Well, and now Star Trek The Next Generation, moving on. We're not covering that one today because. Why,
I,
Josh?
I blogged about it extensively
Yes.
with The Measure of the Man and that wonderful episode about Data's right to exist, whether or not he was property or a life form. And it was an exceptional episode when it came out. And that one was actually very good on the race issue because it's a subtle argument, and the argument Riker had to make was right out of the Dred Scott opinion. And so it really bothers lawyers when you watch it, and if you've read the opinion, you realize what he's arguing,
Yeah.
and that's pretty creepy. It's also really good on women's issues because the Captain Jag officer, is overseeing the trial and is a very strong character, and she's of equal rank to Picard, which was different than the court martial episode in the 60s, where the lieutenant was, a lower rank than Kirk. But anyway, they both do parallels of both had relationships with their captains, um, both prosecuted boyfriends, like stuff that we would not allow. If you want a quick motion to just, for a mistrial or to get rid of the
Yes.
DA, it's like, Your Honor, the prosecutor has a relationship with my client. That's a great way to get somebody out of a trial. So, but I've
But it
blogged
makes
about
for
that.
good TV.
Yeah, it's just but people who go like, we wouldn't allow that. That wouldn't happen.
All right, so we'll move on to Deep Space Nine. What about that one? And that's when I'd say I never actually watched it all. Did you like that series much? Are you?
I
How do you
loved
rate
DS9.
it?
I loved
Really?
it. Was a little darker,
Okay.
and about 3 seasons, a substantial, part of the entire series, they were at war with the Dominion. And, the series was made in the 1990s, the late
Mm-hmm.
1990s, and we were at relative peace. We had some horrible terrorist attacks, but we were in relative peace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we had a war story taking place in Star Trek during that time. And so after September 11th, when we're, in a state of war effectively for a decade with everything that's happened, it's very interesting to go back and watch that, being
Hmm.
able to see how that society dealt with war and the parallels that we have with it. But one of the best episodes, in my opinion, there were a lot of good ones. They did a lot of good stuff with DS9, was In the Pale Moonlight. And in it, the Federation is losing the war with the Dominion, and they need to get the Romulans onto their side. So Cisco goes to Garrick the Tailor, who's the former, spy for the Cardassians, and they develop a plan to get the Romulans into the war, to basically trick the Romulans into thinking, hey, the Dominion's
Huh?
planning an attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the secret Pearl Harbor file that has been taken from them. So they're going to go try to convince this Romulan senator that this is the case. Well, it doesn't work. The Romulan senator doesn't believe them, and as the Romulan leaves, a couple days later, Cisco finds out that his shuttle exploded. That Garrick had planted a bomb on it, and so Garrick orchestrated the murder of this senator to make it look like the Dominion killed the senator.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Romulans looked at the forensic evidence and the hollow card that they had with the war plans on it, that was enough to convince the Romulans to get into the war. And the entire episode is Cisco doing this confession as a personal log because it bothered him. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, he's like, he talked about, I can live with all of this. And at the end, he deletes the personal log. So it's very,
Wow.
I mean, it was exceptionally well done. I mean, like it deals, with heavy issues of the ends justifying the means, personal guilt for doing this, even though it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's spycraft, and it's the messy, ugly part of war, and it was exceptionally well done. And so DS9 definitely is worth people rewatching again,
All
because they
right.
they had some really good writing, and that was one of the many good episodes that they had.
All right. Cool. I'll have to check that out. All right. How about Voyager?
Voyager, two episodes, and they'll be very quick. Author dealt with the Doctor, who was a hologram, who wrote a holo novel, and in it he depicted his shipmates, and it was, the name of his holo novel was Protons Be Free, to talk about the issues of holographic life form rights. Well, he tries to exercise some control over his creation, and there was an argument about whether or not he's a life form,
Sure.
and because he's a hologram. And in it, they don't resolve that whether or not he's a life form, but they do find that he's an artist and can control his creative works.
Oh,
And
cool.
and then it ends with all the other emergency medical hologram Mark Ones are being used for menial labor, like digging in a mine someplace. And so it's like borderline convict leasing type issues that they kind of flirt with and never touch again. The
Hmm.
other one, the big one, is Death Wish. And in that, a member of the Q continuum wants to commit suicide. And the crew of Voyager finds him. And so there's a hearing about whether or not to give him amnesty. And the entire issue is focusing on the quality of his life. There are powerful arguments for suicide, powerful arguments for life. And in this, there's, the argument is it would destroy or, create a significant disruption in the Q continuum. And there's a very great quote that the Q who wants to commit suicide makes, saying, dealing with the rights of the individual will be protected as long as they do not conflict with the state.
Wow.
And it's like, ooh, very good.
Yeah.
And so they end up granting him amnesty. And the other Q, from the next generation,
I love
um,
that cue.
ends up giving him this incurable, hemlock to commit suicide with. And he was the one who argued for keeping him alive and saying that you need a little of the disruption. And so it was a powerful episode because of the different legal issues and moral issues that they argued in there. But they did an exceptional job with it.
Wow. Gosh, see, I'm gonna have to go back and watch these. I have not seen some of these, and you're making a good appeal or a good pitch for why I need to watch them. All right, and also Voyager, of course, was cool too because that was the one with the first female captain, right? Isn't
Yes.
that Voyager? So that was pretty awesome. So I did watch it for a while, but I didn't watch all of them. But I need to go back and do that.
It was exceptional, and that was Captain Janeway, played by
Yep.
Kate Mulgrew, who did a very, very good job.
She was
So,
good. She was tough. I loved her.
indeed, she was. And
All right. Oh, go ahead.
which brings us to Enterprise. Enterprise, a couple issues, and the third season was a reflection of our time because it was post 9/11. We were,
Hmm.
fighting in Afghanistan, we were fighting in Iraq, we were fighting on the war on terror, and the entire third season was them being at war against the Xindi because the Xindi used a weapon of mass destruction that killed 7 million people in Florida. So let's go to the Xindi homeworld and stop them from building a weapon that will destroy all of Earth. And the entire season is about let's save Earth so we're not wiped out of existence. Well, there are moral issues and legal issues throughout that entire season, dealing with Archer roughing up to torturing a prisoner to get answers because they needed to, capturing someone and like messing with their mind in a kind of an interrogation type fashion with a simulator to try to get answers. Um, Making a clone of the engineer to breed a part because the engineer gets hurt and
Oh,
and so it's basically grow a clone to get the body part that they need.
what was that
And so
movie? There was that movie? Was it with Ethan Hawke or Edward Norton? I always get them confused.
they've got a couple. I mean, like there were some in the 70s even that dealt with
Yeah.
that cloning type issue.
Right.
And so
Anyway.
so so they dealt with that. And it was a powerful season, and they realized not everything was as it seemed. Not everyone in there was bad, but there was a third party manipulating them, pulling the strings, and it was nice, flat out action adventure, fight the bad guys, ending to it, and that was one of the best seasons. Great work by Manny Koto. But the best Enterprise episode dealing with the legal system was one entitled Judgment.
Oh,
And that Archer's captured by Klingons, because he got into a fight with some Klingons because he saved some refugees who were like starving to death, and the Empire wanted them executed. And
Mm.
it's a trial, and it's exceptional to watch because of watching like the Klingon jurisprudence that
Mm-hmm.
deals with, like they have to prove their own innocence. Huge issues like with like not being able to cross-examine, the Klingon captain who Archer, bested by trickery, and the Klingon defense lawyer, has a reformation like in the middle of it because he's been an attorney for 50 years, and like for the last 20 or 30, they've just been putting on show trials in the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like basically a wonderful closing argument about honor being earned, and what a legal system means, and like that was like rock on, nicely done. And so
Wow.
they did a very good job highlighting the importance of our system and of right to counsel, right to cross examination, of being able to, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone committed a crime, and they just and then you get into the cruel and unusual punishment issue as well. So they did some wonderful things in Judgment, which was in the second season of Enterprise. So
All right. Well, there you go. That's very cool. What were you going to say, Josh? Sorry, I cut you off.
in 46 years, Star Trek has been a wonderful allegory of human existence, about hope and,
Mm-hmm.
and what we can be. And when you look back from court martial in 67 to today, and everything that they've done, and what has been a reflection of our times and what we could be, is great. And that includes the legal system as well.
Very nice. I totally agree with that. I would argue that any good science fiction, of course, that's what makes it so great, is that it is a good reflection both of our current state and what we could become, both good and bad, obviously. And yeah, in fact, well, maybe that would be another good discussion at some point, or, what's some of the best sci-fi for reflecting that. So, all right, on to the future. We'll boldly go with more of these podcasts, and we'll continue to make bad Star Trek puns.
The needs of the many. So excellent. Well, we'll stay geeky, and signing off.
Bye.